Jake Morrison looked out the window of the spaceship and saw the alien planet below. It was beautiful but strange. The whole world seemed to be made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. He had never seen anything like it before. "Are you ready for this?" asked Captain Lisa Park. She stood next to him, watching the planet get bigger as their ship got closer. "The Zephyrians are not like other aliens we have met. They are very different." Jake nodded and touched the small bag he carried. Inside was something special, a wooden music box his grandmother had given him when he was a boy. It was old and simple, but it meant everything to him. Most people would think he was crazy for bringing it to meet an alien queen. "I know what I am doing," Jake said quietly. He had studied aliens for 20 years. He knew that sometimes the smallest things could make the biggest difference. The ship called Horizon's Edge was big and powerful. It carried 50 people who worked hard to keep it flying through space. Ben Cole was the man who guided the ship to the right places. Amy Ross was the woman who talked to other ships and planets using radio waves. They were both good at their jobs. "The Zephyrian Queen wants to meet only one human," Captain Park said. "She chose you out of all the people on Earth. That is a great honor, but also a big responsibility." Jake knew this was true. For 300 years, humans had been meeting aliens from other worlds. Some meetings went well, and humans became friends with the aliens. Other meetings went badly, and there was fighting. The Zephyrians were the most powerful aliens humans had ever found. What happened in this meeting could change everything. The planet below was called Ketha Prime. It was the home world of the Zephyrian Empire. The aliens who lived there were tall and looked like they were made of clear glass or crystal. They were very smart and very strong. Their ships could travel faster than any human ship. Their weapons could destroy whole planets. But the Zephyrians were also strange in other ways. They did not seem to feel emotions like humans did. They did not laugh or cry or get angry. They worked together like parts of a big machine. Every Zephyrian did exactly what they were supposed to do, when they were supposed to do it. "Other human ambassadors have tried to make deals with them," said Amy Ross as she checked her equipment. "They offered technology, trade agreements, even military help. The Zephyrians always said no. They are not interested in anything we have." Jake thought about this. He had read all the reports from the other meetings. Human diplomats had brought their best computers, their newest weapons, their most valuable resources. None of it mattered to the Zephyrians. They had better technology than humans could imagine. "Maybe that is the problem," Jake said. "Maybe we have been offering them the wrong things." Captain Park looked at him with worry in her eyes. "Jake, I hope you know what you are doing. If this meeting goes wrong, it could mean war. The Zephyrians could destroy Earth if they wanted to." The ship shook a little as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the window, Jake could see huge crystal cities that rose up from the ground like mountains. The buildings twisted and turned in ways that seemed impossible. Light moved through them in patterns that hurt to look at. "Beginning final approach to the landing zone," said Ben Cole from the pilot's seat. "The Zephyrians are guiding us in with their own systems. I have never seen anything like their technology." Jake felt nervous but also excited. He had spent his whole life studying how different species talked to each other and made friends. He believed that all intelligent beings had something in common, even if it was hard to see at first. The music box in his bag seemed heavier now. His grandmother had made it herself, carving the wood with her own hands. It played an old song called Für Elise when you wound it up. The song was not perfect. Some notes were a little too high or too low because the box was old. But that made it more beautiful, not less. "Landing in 60 seconds, announced Ben. Jake could see Zephyrian beings moving around the landing area. They were even taller than he had expected, maybe 9 feet high. Their bodies were like living, crystal, clear but with colored light moving inside them. They moved in perfect formation, each step matching the others exactly. "They look like they are dancing," said Amy Ross. "Or marching," said Captain Park. The ship touched down with a soft bump. Jake picked up his bag and walked toward the exit. The other crew members wished him luck. They would wait on the ship while he met with the Queen. "Remember," said Captain Park, You are representing all of humanity. Be careful, be respectful, and try to come back alive." Jake smiled. "I will do my best." The ship's door opened, and Jake stepped out onto an alien world. The air smelled like flowers and metal at the same time. The gravity was a little lighter than Earth's, making him feel like he could jump higher than normal. 3 Zephyrians waited for him. They were beautiful in a way that was almost scary. Their crystal bodies caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. When they spoke, their voices sounded like music. "Human Jake Morrison," said the tallest one. "I am Coordinator Zenth. The Queen waits for you. Follow, and do not touch anything." Jake walked between the 3 aliens as they moved toward the Crystal City. Each step echoed strangely in the air. He kept his hand on his bag, feeling the music box inside. Soon he would know if his crazy idea would work, or if he had just made the biggest mistake in human history. The Crystal City was like walking inside a rainbow. Jake followed Coordinator Zenth through streets that seemed to be made of pure light. The buildings around them hummed with soft music that came from somewhere deep inside the crystal walls. Other Zephyrians moved past them, but none looked at Jake. They all walked in the same rhythm, their crystal bodies flashing in perfect time with each other. It was beautiful but also cold, like watching a machine work. "Your queen," Jake said to Zenth. "How long has she ruled your people?" "Queen Veltara has guided us for 3,000 Earth years," Zenth replied. His voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "She is wise beyond measure. She has brought our people peace and order." Jake tried to imagine living for 3,000 years. On Earth, that was longer than all of recorded human history. What would it be like to watch so many years pass by? They walked for 20 minutes through the crystal streets. Jake saw no children, no old people, no one who looked different from anyone else. Every Zephyrian was tall, perfect, and moved exactly like all the others. Finally, they reached the biggest building Jake had ever seen. It rose up into the sky like a mountain made of diamond. Light flowed through it in waves, creating patterns that made Jake dizzy to watch. "The Queen's Palace," said Zenth. "You will enter alone." "We will wait here." Jake looked up at the huge crystal doors. They were covered with symbols that seemed to move and change as he watched them. His heart beat faster. In a few minutes he would meet the most powerful being in this part of the galaxy. The doors opened by themselves with a sound like singing. Jake walked inside, his footsteps echoing in the huge space. The walls around him were smooth crystal that reflected his image hundreds of times. At the end of a long hallway, Jake found the throne room. It was the size of a football field, with a ceiling so high he could barely see it. In the center sat Queen Veltara. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Jake had ever seen. She was 12 feet tall, made of crystal that seemed to contain stars. Light moved through her body in complex patterns that hurt to look at directly. Her face was sharp and perfect, like it had been carved by the greatest artist who ever lived. "Human," she said, and her voice filled the entire room. It sounded like a whole orchestra playing at once. "I am Queen Veltara of the Zephyrian Empire. You are Jake Morrison of Earth." "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake said. He tried to keep his voice steady, but it was hard. Standing in front of her made him feel very small. "Your people have sent many ambassadors to my world," the Queen continued. "They have offered me technology, resources, weapons, knowledge. All things my people already possess in greater measure. Tell me, human, what can you offer that is different?" This was the moment Jake had been waiting for. He reached into his bag and pulled out the small wooden music box. It looked even smaller and more simple in this huge crystal room. The Queen's light patterns flickered. "What is this object?" "It is a music box, Your Majesty," Jake said. "My grandmother made it with her own hands. It plays a song." "Music?" The Queen leaned forward slightly. "We have music. Our entire civilization is built on harmonic frequencies. Your primitive sound-making device cannot compare to our acoustic technology." Jake nodded. "You are right, Your Majesty. This music box is simple and old. It does not work perfectly. Some notes are wrong, but maybe that is what makes it special." He walked closer to the throne, his footsteps echoing loudly. The Queen watched him with eyes that sparkled like distant stars. "May I show you?" Jake asked. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Proceed." Jake knelt down and placed the music box on the crystal floor. It looked tiny and out of place in the huge room. He wound the small key on the side, then opened the lid. The melody of Futuristic began to play. It was soft and gentle, barely loud enough to hear in the huge space. The notes were not perfect. The music box was old and some parts did not work as well as they used to. But the song was beautiful anyway. Jake watched the Queen's face as the music played. At first she looked curious but not interested. Then something changed. The light patterns moving through her crystal body began to slow down. Her perfect posture seemed to soften slightly. The song played for 2 minutes, then slowly wound down to silence. Jake waited, not sure what would happen next. "Again," the Queen said quietly. Jake wound up the music box and let it play again. This time he watched more carefully. The Queen's crystal hands gripped the arms of her throne a little tighter. Her breathing seemed to change, becoming less regular, less perfect. When the song ended the second time, the Queen stood up. She was even taller than Jake had thought, towering over him like a crystal tree. "Where did this music come from?" she asked. "It is an old human song," Jake explained, "written by a man named Beethoven over 400 years ago. My grandmother carved this music box to play it because she loved the melody." "Your grandmother," the Queen repeated. "She is dead?" "Yes, Your Majesty. She died when I was 15 years old. This music box is all I have left of her." The Queen walked down from her throne. Each step made a sound like crystal bells. She stopped a few feet away from Jake and looked down at the small wooden box. "Why did you bring this here?" she asked. Jake took a deep breath. "Because I think your people have forgotten something important. You have perfect technology, perfect order, perfect harmony, but sometimes the most beautiful things are not perfect." The Queen knelt down, bringing her face closer to Jake's level. Up close he could see that her crystal skin was not completely smooth. There were tiny lines and patterns like fractures in ice. "You think we have forgotten beauty?" she asked. "I think you have forgotten that sadness can be beautiful too," Jake said. "And loneliness, in missing someone you love. This song is beautiful because it makes me remember my grandmother, even though it makes me sad that she is gone." The Queen reached out one crystal finger and touched the music box. It was so small compared to her hand that she could have broken it without thinking. "I accept your gift," she said softly. Then she looked directly into Jake's eyes, and Jake saw something he had not expected to see in an alien face. He saw pain and longing and a sadness so deep it seemed to go on forever. "Only one human still understands," the Queen said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and that is you." The Queen held the music box in her crystal hands like it was made of the most precious jewels in the universe. Jake watched as tears began to form in her star-filled eyes. He had never heard of a Zephyrian crying before. "Your Majesty," Jake said gently. "Are you all right?" The Queen was quiet for a long time. The light patterns moving through her body had become slower and softer, like a candle flame instead of lightning. Finally she spoke. "Sit with me, human Jake Morrison. I will tell you a story that no one has heard for 1,000 years." She sat down on the crystal floor next to him, folding her long legs gracefully. Even sitting, she was much taller than Jake, but somehow she seemed smaller now, more fragile. "Long ago, my people were not as you see us today," the Queen began. "We were artists, dreamers, singers of songs that could make the stars themselves weep with joy. Every Zephyrian was different, unique, special in their own way." Jake listened carefully. This was not what he had expected to hear. "Our old world was called Velthis," the Queen continued. "It was a place of such beauty that even now, 3,000 years later, I can barely speak of it without pain. We had crystal forests that sang in the wind, lakes of liquid starlight, mountains that touched the very sky." "What happened to it?" Jake asked softly. The Queen's light dimmed. "Our sun was dying. We had known it for centuries, but we thought we had time. We were wrong. The end came faster than our greatest scientists had predicted." She paused, holding the music box tighter. "In those final days, chaos ruled our world. Families were torn apart as they fought for places on the escape ships. Friends betrayed friends. Children were abandoned by their parents. The beautiful harmony of our society collapsed into screaming and violence." Jake began to understand. "So you decided that emotions were dangerous." "I was young then, only 200 years old," the Queen said. "I watched my own brother kill our father for a seat on an evacuation ship. I saw my mother throw herself into a lake of fire rather than live with the shame. I learned that feelings, no matter how beautiful, lead to destruction when survival is at stake." The Queen stood up and walked to a crystal window that looked out over her city. Jake followed her and saw thousands of Zephyrians moving through the streets below, all in perfect synchronization. When we reached this world, I made a vow, she said. Never again would my people suffer the chaos of uncontrolled emotion. We would be logical, efficient, peaceful. We would survive. But what about joy? Jake asked. What about love and hope and wonder? The Queen touched the window with one crystal finger. We decided those feelings were too dangerous. They lead to disappointment, loss, pain. Better to feel nothing than to feel too much. Jake looked out at the crystal city. It was beautiful, but it was also empty somehow, like a perfect sculpture that had never been touched by living hands. Your Majesty, he said. May I ask you something personal? She nodded. In all these 3,000 years, have you been happy? The Queen was quiet for so long that Jake wondered if she had heard him. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I have not been happy, but I have also not been sad. I have not been angry or frightened or disappointed. I have simply existed. She turned away from the window and looked at the music box again. Until today, your grandmother's music box has awakened something in me that I thought was dead forever. When I hear that simple, imperfect melody, I remember what it felt like to be young, to dream, to hope for tomorrow. Jake felt his heart beating faster. Is that a bad thing? I do not know, the Queen admitted. For 3,000 years I have led my people with perfect logic and control. But now I find myself wondering, what if we chose the wrong path? What if, in trying to avoid pain, we also threw away everything that made life worth living? Back on the spaceship, Captain Lisa Park was getting worried. Jake had been gone for 4 hours, much longer than any previous human ambassador. She paced back and forth on the bridge, watching the Crystal Palace through her binoculars. Any word from him? She asked Amy Ross. Nothing, Amy replied. The Zephyrians are blocking all our communication attempts. I cannot even get a simple status check through. Ben Cole looked up from his navigation station. Captain, I am seeing some strange energy readings from the palace. The harmonic frequencies are different than normal. Dr. Kate Williams, the mission's chief scientist, was studying the readings on her computer screen. This is unprecedented, she said. The biosignatures we are detecting from the Queen show emotional activity we have never seen in a Zephyrian before. Captain Park frowned. Is that good or bad? I honestly do not know, Dr. Williams admitted. Inside the palace, Jake and the Queen continued their conversation. The Queen had told him about her long, lonely centuries of rule, about making decisions that affected billions of lives while feeling nothing herself. I have a confession to make, the Queen said. I chose you to come here not because your leaders recommended you. I chose you because I have been watching your people for many years, studying how you live, how you love, how you face loss and keep going anyway. Jake was surprised. You have been watching us? Yes. And of all the humans I observed, you seemed to understand something that others did not. When your grandmother died, you grieved for her, but you also celebrated her life. You kept her memory alive through stories in this music box. You found a way to transform pain into something beautiful. The Queen sat down again and carefully wound up the music box. As the melody played, she closed her eyes and let the imperfect notes wash over her. I have been slowly dying, Jake Morrison, she said when the song ended. Not my body, but my spirit. 3,000 years of feeling nothing has left me empty inside. But this music, this simple gift from your heart, has reminded me of who I used to be. What will you do now? Jake asked. The Queen opened her eyes and looked at him with something that might have been hope. I want to learn how to feel again. I want to remember what it means to be truly alive. But I am afraid. If I change, if I allow emotion back into my life, what will happen to my people? They have depended on my logic and control for so long. Jake thought about this carefully. Maybe you do not have to choose between feeling and leading. Maybe the best leaders are the ones who understand both. The Queen smiled for the first time in 1,000 years. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile, but it was real. Will you help me, human? She asked. Will you teach me how to find the balance between heart and mind that your people seem to understand so naturally? Jake nodded. I will do whatever I can, Your Majesty. 3 days had passed since Jake first played the music box for Queen Veltara. He had been staying in a crystal guest room in the palace, talking with the Queen for hours each day. She was learning to feel emotions again, and it was not easy for her. This morning I felt something new, the Queen told Jake as they sat in her private garden. The garden was beautiful, filled with crystal plants that sang soft melodies in the wind. I was watching the sunrise and suddenly I felt— what is the word for it? What did it feel like? Jake asked. Like my heart was full of warm light. Like I wanted to smile for no reason. Like the world was more beautiful than I had noticed before. Jake grinned. That sounds like happiness, Your Majesty. Happiness, the Queen repeated, testing the word. It is a strange feeling. It makes me want to laugh, but also makes me want to cry. Is that normal? Very normal, Jake assured her. Emotions are complicated. Sometimes we feel happy and sad at the same time. But their peaceful talks were interrupted when 3 crystal beings entered the garden. Jake recognized Coordinator Zenth and 2 other high-ranking Zephyrians. They looked upset, which was unusual since Zephyrians normally showed no emotion at all. Your Majesty, Zenth said, his musical voice sounding strained. We must speak with you. Urgent matters require your attention, the Queen sighed. What troubles you, my advisors? Your behavior has been irregular, said another advisor named Kyleth. Your decision-making patterns have changed. The Collective Council is concerned. Jake noticed that the Queen's light patterns shifted when she became defensive. Her crystal body grew brighter and the colors moved faster. I am still your Queen, Veltara said firmly. My decisions are my own to make. But Your Majesty, Zenth continued, you have been spending all your time with this human instead of attending to state business. Trade negotiations with the Andorian Republic have been delayed. Military deployments to the outer colonies have been postponed. The people are beginning to ask questions. Jake felt uncomfortable. He had not realized that his time with the Queen was causing problems for her empire. Perhaps I should return to my ship, Jake offered quietly. No, the Queen said quickly. You will stay. The 3 advisors looked at each other with what Jake was learning to recognize as Zephyrian confusion. Their light patterns flickered in synchronized waves. Your Majesty, Kyleth said carefully, we have received word that the Galactic Council is becoming impatient. They expect a formal response to their trade proposals within the next 2 days. The Queen stood up, her full height making her tower over everyone else in the garden. Tell the Galactic Council that I will respond when I am ready. But Your Majesty, Zenth began. Leave us, the Queen commanded. The 3 advisors bowed and left the garden, but Jake could see they were worried. After they were gone, the Queen sat down again, but her crystal body was still glowing brightly with agitation. They think I am becoming weak, she said sadly. For 3,000 years I have made every decision quickly and logically. Now they see me taking time to consider my feelings and they do not understand. Jake reached over and wound up the music box. As the familiar melody played, he watched the Queen's light pattern slowly calm down. Change is always scary, Jake said. For you and for them. They have depended on you being one way for so long that they do not know how to handle you being different. But what if they are right? The Queen asked. What if my emotions make me a worse leader? What if I make decisions based on feelings instead of facts and hurt my people? Jake thought about this seriously. It was a fair question. On Earth, we have learned that the best leaders use both their heads and their hearts, he said. Facts tell you what is possible, but feelings tell you what is right. That evening, Jake was surprised when Captain Park contacted him through a communication device the Queen had given him. Jake, we need to talk, Captain Park said. Can you come back to the ship for a few hours? When Jake arrived at the horizon's edge, he found the entire senior crew waiting for him in the meeting room. They all looked concerned. Jake, Captain Park began, we have been monitoring the situation and we are worried. The Zephyrian government seems to be in some kind of crisis. Their normal communication patterns have been disrupted. Dr. Kate Williams pulled up some charts on her computer. The harmonic frequencies from their cities have changed. It is like their entire society is becoming unstable. And we are getting pressure from Earth, added Amy Ross. Admiral Frank Price sent a message demanding immediate results. The Galactic Council wants to know why negotiations have stalled. Jake felt a weight settle in his chest. So everyone thinks this is my fault. Not your fault, Captain Park said gently. But your responsibility. Jake, what exactly is happening between you and the Queen? Jake told them about the Queen's past, about how the Zephyrians had given up emotions to survive, and about how the music box had awakened feelings the Queen thought were dead forever. So she is having some kind of emotional breakdown? asked Ben Cole. Not a breakdown, Jake said. More like a breakthrough. She is remembering how to be a complete person instead of just a logical machine. Dr. Williams frowned. But Jake, if her behavior changes affect the stability of their entire empire, millions of lives could be at risk. And if it causes a war with other alien species, Captain Park added, billions of lives could be at risk. Jake felt torn between two impossible choices. He could abandon the Queen and return to Earth, leaving her to face her emotional awakening alone. Or he could stay and help her, even if it meant risking the stability of galactic peace. There is something else, Amy Ross said quietly. We intercepted a message from the Zephyrian military. Some of their generals are talking about removing the Queen from power if her behavior does not return to normal. Jake's heart sank. A coup? It is possible, Captain Park said. Jake, I know you care about the Queen, but you have to think about the bigger picture. Maybe it would be better for everyone if things went back to the way they were. That night, Jake could not sleep. He lay in his bunk on the spaceship, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what his crew had told him. Were they right? Was he being selfish by encouraging the Queen to change? The next morning, he returned to the palace to find the Queen waiting for him in the garden. She looked different, sadder, more fragile than before. My advisors have been talking to your ship's crew, she said without looking at him. They think I should send you away. Jake sat down next to her. What do you think? The Queen was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. I think that for the first time in 3,000 years I feel truly alive, but I also think that my feelings might destroy everything I have built. She looked at him with eyes full of newly learned pain. Jake Morrison, I must ask you to make an impossible choice. Will you stay with me and help me learn to balance emotion with duty, even if it risks the peace of the galaxy? Or will you leave me to face this alone, so that things can return to the safe, cold order my people have always known? Jake looked at the Queen, this ancient, powerful being who had become his friend, and realized that his answer would change the fate of two entire civilizations. Jake looked at Queen Veltara sitting beside him in the crystal garden. Her star-filled eyes were waiting for his answer, and he could see both hope and fear in them. The weight of his decision felt heavier than all the planets in the galaxy. Your Majesty, Jake said slowly, I think there might be a third choice. The Queen tilted her head. What do you mean? What if you do not have to choose between feeling and leading? What if the answer is not to go back to the old way or to change completely, but to find a new way that uses the best of both? Jake stood up and began pacing around the garden as he thought out loud. Your people learned to suppress their emotions because they thought feelings led to chaos. But what if they were only half right? What if uncontrolled emotions lead to chaos but controlled emotions lead to wisdom? The Queen considered this. You think there is a balance to be found? I think your people might be ready to learn what mine learned long ago, Jake said. That the strongest leaders are not the ones who feel nothing, but the ones who feel everything and still choose to do what is right. Over the next week, Jake worked with the Queen to develop a plan. Instead of hiding her emotional awakening from her people, she would share it with them gradually. She would show them that feelings could make her a better leader, not a worse one. The first test came when the Andorian Republic demanded an immediate answer to their trade proposal. In the past, the Queen would have analyzed the data and made a logical decision within hours. This time she took 3 days. I need to feel what this decision means, she explained to her puzzled advisors, not just calculate its effects. When she finally announced her decision, it surprised everyone. Instead of the standard trade agreement the Andorians expected, she proposed something new, a cultural exchange program that would benefit both civilizations in ways that pure economics never could. The Andorians were delighted. The trade deal that resulted was more profitable and more meaningful than anything either species had achieved before. Coordinator Zenth came to the Queen after the announcement. Your Majesty, I do not understand how you knew this approach would work. Logic told me what was possible, the Queen explained. But my feelings told me what was right. The Andorians are not just numbers on a trade report. They are living beings with hopes and dreams like ours. When I considered their feelings as well as their needs, the solution became clear. Word of the Queen's new approach spread throughout the Zephyrian Empire. At first, many citizens were confused and worried. They had lived their entire lives believing that emotions were dangerous. But slowly, something wonderful began to happen. Young Zephyrians started to ask questions about the old ways. Artists who had hidden their creativity for centuries began to create again. Scientists discovered that imagination led to better inventions than pure logic alone. Jake watched these changes with amazement and pride. But he also knew that his work was not finished. "I want to ask you for something very important," he told the Queen one day as they sat together listening to the music box play its familiar melody. "Anything," she replied. "I want you to let me bring other humans here. Not diplomats or soldiers, but teachers, artists, musicians, storytellers. People who can show your citizens that emotions and logic can work together." The Queen was quiet for a moment. "You want to change my entire civilization?" "I want to help your civilization remember who they used to be, while keeping the wisdom they have gained," Jake said. "Your people do not have to choose between order and creativity, between peace and passion. They can have both." The Queen smiled, an expression that was becoming more natural for her each day. "Yes, let us try this experiment." Over the following months, small groups of humans began arriving on Ketha Prime. Steve Clark, a pilot from Earth, brought musicians who taught Zephyrian children how to sing songs that expressed individual feelings instead of collective harmony. Dr. Ruth Miller established a research center where human and Zephyrian scientists worked together, discovering that creativity and intuition could solve problems that logic alone could not touch. Most importantly, the Queen herself began to change. The more she learned to balance her emotions with her reasoning, the better leader she became. She made decisions faster than before, but also more wisely. Her people began to trust her judgment in ways they never had when she was purely logical. The transformation was not always easy. Some older Zephyrians resisted the changes, preferring the safety of the old ways. There were protests, arguments, and moments when Jake wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. But the Queen had learned something important from the music box. That imperfection could be beautiful. She did not expect the transition to be smooth, and she did not panic when problems arose. Instead, she faced each challenge with both her mind and her heart. The real test came 2 years later, when a crisis threatened the entire Zephyrian Empire. A plague struck one of their colony worlds, and traditional medical treatments were not working. In the old days, the Queen would have ordered the planet quarantined and written off the millions of lives there as an acceptable loss. Instead, she made a different choice. She reached out to every species in the galaxy, asking for help not just with medicine but with hope. She sent musicians to sing to the sick, artists to paint murals of healing on hospital walls, and storytellers to remind the dying that their lives had meaning. The combination of advanced medicine and emotional support worked better than anyone had expected. The plague was defeated, and the colony world recovered stronger than before. When news of this success spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to look at the Zephyrians with new respect. The cold, logical empire had become something new, a civilization that combined the best of reason and emotion. Jake knew it was time for him to return to Earth, but the Queen had one more surprise for him. "I have been working on something," she said, leading him to her private workshop. On a crystal table sat a music box unlike any he had ever seen. It was made of living crystal that sang with harmonic frequencies, but it was shaped like wood and carved with the same patterns as his grandmother's box. "Wind it up," the Queen said. Jake turned the crystal key, and the box began to play for Elise. But this version was different. It started with the familiar melody, but then added new harmonies, new variations, new beauty. The song was the same, but also completely transformed. "It is perfect," Jake said, tears forming in his eyes. "No," the Queen corrected gently. "It is beautifully imperfect. Just like the original. Just like me. Just like all of us." Years later, when Jake was an old man back on Earth, he would tell his nephew Billy about the alien queen who learned to feel again. He would explain how the smallest gift, a simple music box, had changed the fate of an entire galactic empire. "But Uncle Jake?" Billy would ask. "Why did the music box work when all the fancy technology did not?" Jake would smile and wind up both music boxes, the original wooden one and the crystal one the Queen had made for him. "Because, Billy," he would say as the two melodies played together in harmony, "sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is not technology or weapons or logic. Sometimes it is just one person showing another that it is okay to feel, to be imperfect, to be beautifully, wonderfully human. And in the Crystal Palace on Ketha Prime, Queen Veltara would be listening to her own music box and remembering the human who taught her that strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from accepting it as part of what makes life worth living. The message she had sent to Jake on his final day still echoed in her heart. You taught us that to be truly alive, we must risk being hurt. To be truly strong, we must allow ourselves to be vulnerable. To be truly wise, we must balance our minds with our hearts. This is why only one human still understands, and that will always be you.